first thing is in the Big Eye video, they talked about owning your story. What does that mean to you?
I kind of look at our story as one of our greatest assets that we're entrusted with. And because of that, there's two things. I think we're called to protect the integrity of our story, and I think we're called to tell our story. The power of the story is in the invitation into the story. So when I look back over the last 40 years of being in the marketplace and the last 20 years of those 40s, having an intentional design to connect with folks one-on-one, I think I found a silver bullet in the power of the story, and it's simply this. When you invite people into your story, they see something of themselves in your story. And is that very moment that a connection is made, an emotional connection that really can accelerate tenfold the deepening of a relationship. It is a connection that transcends the transactional. It is a connection that can eliminate years of surface chatter where you're just trying to get to a place to know someone. So if you think about that from a personal standpoint, as you engage with your prospects or your client, invite them into your story. And even like when Clark was talking a little bit earlier today, he shared a little bit of his story with us. And I would dare to say that there were a number of us in this room that saw something of ourselves in the story that Clark shared. So I think it's incumbent upon us as a company to continue to tell our story, to continue to invite people into our story. If you think about the IOA story, once heard, it's a story that I would submit to you that is a story much greater than most people could ever imagine being a part of. And I'm guessing there's a number of people here that could give testimony to that. So at a personal level, I think you look and you look for ways to maybe lead with greater degrees of transparency as you're engaging with your prospects and your clients and with your friends and those around you, and invite them in. And I will tell you the shortest route to invite people into your story is to simply ask them about their story. And when you do that, I'm telling you, there's a relational connection that is made that will transcend years of just surface conversation.
So, I quoted you a little earlier, and for those of you not had a chance to meet Jon, he looks at the world a little differently than most people who are traditionally in the insurance agency business. I get a chance in my role to interact with a lot of different, CEOs and presidents and thought leaders from some other agencies, and Jon looks at things a little bit differently than what most of those people do. So, he's a real asset to the company in that way. And I quoted you in talking about reverse mentoring. So, in addition to maybe kind of talking a little bit more about that and what that means, where would you find that? If you're not in a mentor-mentee role, how do you go about finding somebody to help you navigate something that's a little tough for you?
Sure, I'll answer the second part first. You don't have to go too far, but to look around you and find some of the younger folks kind of in your midst. The quickest way is to actually make yourself available to mentor someone else. And in the process of mentoring, I think you'll clearly see that you'll be mentored in that process. At worst case, go hang out at a coffee shop somewhere and invite some folks to sit down with you and ask them four simple words. What do you think? And for me, I use it's an intentional design in what I do to basically to stay relevant, to stay forward thinking, to expand the boundaries of my thoughts. I kind of liken it to the idea of investing backwards so as to learn forward. And when you think about the younger generations, they're less constrained in their thoughts. They oftentimes use different language, which causes us to have to listen differently, hear differently. They can bring contemporary perspectives to traditional thought, which is tremendously valuable if we're trying to find some relative basis to what used to be and how we apply it today. I even think about the information, right? I don't know how much of for you all, but I can't handle all of the information that comes my way. And so a lot of these young folks are very good at helping me basically synthesize down a lot of this information into very manageable nuggets that I can grab hold of and actually use. So it's a powerful tool. You don't have to go far, but just to look around and even make yourself available to mentor some folks and then ask them, hey, what do you think about this?
So when we talked about building this client engagement team, and kind of this started a few years ago of really trying to, as the world is exponentially changing, we need to listen, exponentially better. We need to really engage our clients. Can you tell me a little bit about the genesis? Where did you get this idea of putting together this focus group, and
Sure,
tell me how that
so
came about?
Kind of when I look back on that, I think we were actually dialing into the whole client experience and client engagement process without even knowing it. You made reference to the fact that we did some recrafting of our mission, vision, value statement a few years back, and did state in there that we want to be a place that our people nor our clients ever want to leave. That as opposed to a place they're wildly attracted to. And when you build things through the lens of creating an environment that people never want to leave, you're going to do it in a way that has a longer term, and it's going to have real stickiness to it. Rob had coined the term a couple years ago, unfireable, right? We began to look at a client engagement ecosystem where we could create somewhat of a closed loop system with some of the varied and sundry services that we offer, again, to create additional stickiness. And then we set out a strategic objective to basically create a seamless and frictionless client experience. Now, we said all that before the whole client engagement got kind of a hot topic in the industry. But to answer the question of the genesis of it, enter one of the young mentors for me, a 28-year-old fellow from a company here in town, a software technology company known as Power DMS. He's a co-founder of that business, and his name is Heath Hensley. And Heath introduced me to the whole concept of customer journey and mapping your customer journey. So we began to look at that. It was a multi-year process that they had taken under, and they have gone through and basically taken every element of the client experience for their company and mapped it across kind of the continuum. And what's really cool about what they've done is they've identified these moments of truth that occur all throughout the client journey. And then we might call them decision points or decision paths, but they've even taken it further and they've identified the emotions that are attached to each one of these moments of truth. There's something known as the empathy map, which is think, feel, say, and do. And they've actually gone in and in each moment of truth, they are looking to say, at this moment in time, what is the client thinking? What are they saying? What are they likely to do? And how are they feeling? And then they're trying to adjust their journey, if you will, according to the feedback that they're getting. So we constituted the team. As you mentioned, Amy's going to mention more about that in a bit, I think, and she's heading that up. It's a strategic go-forward initiative for us, and we've got sales and operational leadership on there. We're first looking at it from a service perspective, and we're excited to see what it's going to yield. We know right out of the gate we're going to pick up a lot of low-hanging fruit. We have a kind of a varied environment here from a service perspective to try to knit it all into one journey, but it's going to help us be particularly able to create that seamless, frictionless experience, which ultimately I think gets after some of the thwarting off, some of the disruption that might be around the corner.
So last question. You're baby boomer, I'm a Gen X. It's easy to look at all the things Heath talked about in some of those slides, and I think maybe get a little overwhelmed or intimidated. When you look at technology, what emotions does that stir in you? Do you feel anxiety? Do you feel anticipation? How do you look at that stuff?
Well, I look and say there's an excitement associated with it. It would concern me if we chose to ignore it, which I think you've heard clearly today that that's not going to happen. And it would equally concern me if we lost sight of the fact, or we failed to remember that the core to long-term sustainable success is found in relationships, as you've noted, and several had noted this morning as well. So I kind of look and say, as we lean into this and we look at the blend of technology, we have to press forward and what I'll look for the intersection of technology and touch, right? So from a technology standpoint, I envision us as we move downstream that we'll operate more with an open architecture type structure, seeing ourselves more as systems integrators as opposed to necessarily developers, working with our partners to find best of class tools that we can seamlessly bolt into our client experience such a way that we maintain that competitive edge. From a touch perspective, I would contend, and I will hold fast to this, and there may be a day when I'm proven wrong, but I believe that the client experience and the client engagement and the client interaction is in its most human form an intimate, interpersonal, emotional experience. And if we lose sight of that, it will be something that I think we would regret. So I look at that through the lens of the emotion of risk. And when you think about the idea of trust, you saw trusted choice. We think of ourselves as trusted advisors. Well, there's an underlying innate characteristic in every human being that requires and mandates the need for trust, and it's fear. So the best antidote for fear is trust. Trust yields peace. So as we are able to work with our clients, understand their unique business needs, offer them an understanding in such that they trust us, we negate that fear that they have, perhaps that fear of loss, fear of risk, whatever that might be. Understanding has value, trust has value, peace has value. And if they know that we get it and they've got it, then that's a great equation. It's a great long-term equation. So that's kind of the way I look at that piece. From an individual standpoint, as we think of ourselves individually, I believe the call at this point, in the face of disruption, is to see ourselves as disruptors in a world captivated by disruption. And to me, that is part of basically taking an inward look at yourself, each of us, and saying, what do we need to do to be more relevant to the marketplace? How do we need to think differently? How do we need to engage the marketplace differently? What things do we need to do to basically cause us to be more contemporary in our thoughts, more adaptive in our thinking, and expand the boundaries of our thinking and see things differently, right? It's very doable. So I brought this up here because it's a book I've recently read that I would commend to anyone that wanted to read it. And curiously enough, it's entitled Disrupt Yourself. So I think that's kind of what I'm talking about with that last point, but it's a tremendous resource and tool to be able to get some nuggets on how to go at it from an individual and personal basis.
Thanks, John. You're kind of hitting on some of the sales classes I took when I first made the switch from the carrier side to IOA. One of the things that they've always said in sales 101 from the beginning, people buy on emotion and then they justify it with logic. And that's what we're talking about today, continuing to build on relationships, to get that emotional connection with our clients. And I think if we do that, the future is going to be just as great as the past has been. So thanks for your time, John.
Yep.